Hello, listener. Welcome to another episode of the Get Better at Recruiting podcast. This is episode 7, in which Sonny, Alex, and I will discuss how to better engage with our candidate population. In the recruiting profession, the candidate is likely the most important person you're going to, and the most frequent person you're going to talk to on a daily basis and in your career. Certainly, we talk to hiring managers, we talk to our peers, we talk to our managers, but you are going to spend 90% of your time, your day, your week, your career talking to candidates. So why not get better at communicating with them? We're going to jump into it shortly, but before we do, I please ask, and Sonny and Alex also ask, that you like us, share us, please subscribe. It keeps the podcast going, helps spread the word with the algorithm and all of the podcast platforms. So if you do enjoy this podcast, please share it with others and like it and subscribe. And now we'll jump into it.
The initial call with a candidate,
Yeah.
I think that's what sets apart good recruiters from great recruiters.
Yeah,
the way that you do it.
So as we've talked about in a couple of previous podcasts, welcome back, listener. Alex, Noel, and Sonny here. I mentioned in an earlier podcast, so I have a newer team, and I'll do an occasional candidate intake call for, with my team, and I'll do the call, and we'll hang up. And again, for the three of us, 25 years in, it's just like this conversation right here, right? It's just having a conversation. There's no fear. There's no hesitation. It's just a conversation, a conversation with another professional. So we hang up the call and I pat myself on the back. My recruiters are always like, "Oh my God, that was incredible. That was the best call I've ever heard. You are so smooth. You know how to do the thing." And it's like, you can all get there. And that's, listener, what today's call is about. How do you do that initial intake call with a candidate? What topics do you cover? What prep do you do ahead of time? How do you make it a comfortable conversation? How do you make it flow? So it's not, you're not hesitating. You're not uhs and ahs and don't know where to go next. One of the things, and I'll start things off, with our team, they're all relatively new. I have a checklist for them, right? There's, these things they need to cover, and we'll talk about those later, but there's these things they need to cover. And I had a conversation with Jessica not that long ago. I overheard her conversation. She hung up and I said, "How'd you feel about that?" She goes, "I felt really nervous, this, that, and the other thing." I'm like, "But you got all the information, right?" She goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "So what I would advise you to do is you do need to get all that information, but you don't need to get all that information in that order, right? Mm-hmm. Pick up on where the candidate is taking the conversation to zig and zag and go left and right. And, "Oh, it's interesting you mentioned that. That's one of the things I need to talk to you about." And then go with the question, right? You can go to question number 8 and go back to question number 3. Mm-hmm. And look, and I'm so transparent that when a conversation is kind of winding down, we're getting to the end of our time, the candidate needs to go or I need to go. I'm like, "Hey, one last thing. I forgot to ask you about X," right? It could have been question number 4. Or, "Hey, before next steps, I need to ask you about compensation," or whatever the case might be. But again, you got to get all the questions answered, but you don't have to go in order. So what say you? How do you start your conversation? So where does it all start? Give us your magic.
I'll go back to Aerotech training, right? We had a form. It was called a G2, and it was literally a form that you had to submit to your account manager with the resume that had all the information. Mm-hmm. And back then I can remember listening to people basically just go right down the list, and it sounded like taking an order, right?
Yep.
You learn. Like you said, it's got to be conversational. And what I do now and what I figured out a while ago is the first thing I do, I ask the same 3 questions to everybody when I start. And I ask them at the same time, and I basically just get the candidate talking, right? The prospect talking. And it's, tell me about your experience, what you're doing now. Tell me about what you want to do next. What's your next job look like? And why are we talking? Right? Why are you talking to a recruiter right now? Why are you looking to leave? There's a reason why you
somebody you sourced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even an applicant. If it's an applicant or a passive candidate I've sourced, anything, I always start with that. Even the passive candidate that's not necessarily looking that I reached out to, I'll always start with that. And I do it for a couple of reasons. You want to get them talking. and I think I mentioned this in one of the last podcasts, is I want them to talk before I give them the answers to the test. Right? I know what the job is. They have an idea what the job is, but I want them to be honest with me about what they want to do and not just regurgitate the job description.
Yeah, listener at home, the worst thing you can do, and I'm sure we three have done it, other recruiters have done it, is to go into the phone call with an agenda and say, hey, I'm looking for a 5'2" point guard who can dribble left-handed between the legs. And they go, oh, I'm totally that.
5'1"
and you're like,
and 3/4.
Right. So don't go into the call with a predisposed pitch. And I think Sonny's got a great point, which is this will come up. This is going to sound really hokey and dad jokes, but you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen on these calls.
Mine is different.
Go ahead. That's why that's why there's 3 of us.
Yeah, mine is actually very non-conventional. Is I do go into what we're looking for, and I have them help me understand why they are a fit according to those skills. So it's somewhere and also in the first 10 minutes, I talk about location and compensation, and I tell them that, hey, this interview, this call is going to be very non-conventional. I am going to jump around because that's just how I collect information about your greatness, right? I jump around. I get curious really fast during all parts of the interview process. I hate going from top to bottom or bottom up. It drives me crazy. So once location compensation is out of the way and everything's kosher there, we move along. And I tell them what the manager is looking for. And I ask them, I said, help me understand, because I'm not technical. I know enough to be dangerous. We all are. Help me understand what you do, why you do it really well, so I can take good notes and be your ambassador. Going back to that whole ambassador part we talked about a couple of episodes ago. And then they do most of the talking. And then I come back and ask a couple of questions. Yeah. Because we only have 30 minutes, really. Because sometimes I have back-to-back calls. They have meetings to go to. So in 30 minutes, and you know how some people are, listener, this is your first episode that you listen to. We're all pretty much in the technical space. And that's one thing that technical people like to do is talk. Yeah. You get them going about a project, they will tell you how they built it, how they stacked it, which is beautiful and wonderful information to their peers.
But way over my head.
Yep. It makes my eyes roll.
My eyes go
and you know what, guys? I have tried over the years to really sink into the technology. And I understand if I could whiteboard, a technical environment for you where the coders sit and the network guys sit, security guys, all that stuff. But you start talking about gigs, bytes, and terabytes, you're going to make me dizzy. I'm probably going to faint. So don't do that. Candidate. I tell them that. Yep. and it really helps them open up. Yep. We build that. So I kind of try to become their ambassador and become, in a way, their friend within that company. Going back to the job description that we talked about, I don't try to be a robot and you helping me understand. I really want to get to know who you are. Because Sonny said that on our last episode, right? Is that listening and helping. If you can't help me document quickly who you are, what you're good at, what you're missing, and how much you want, where you live within 30 minutes, I'm not going to be able to deliver that message to the hiring manager. And then it's going to make me look bad. So I tell them, make me look good. Help me understand. So that's kind of how I do it.
So
you're not conventional.
Before you even jump on a call with a candidate, let's back up a couple steps or two. When you're, how do you prep for that call? Are you reviewing the resume? You checking out their LinkedIn? How deep do you go? Is it surface level? You're comparing the rec to the resume. Just walk us through that, Sonny. Where do you start? Before you even jump on the call, you got to have some preparation done, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. So I think the one thing that I will typically look for, whether it's passive candidates or LinkedIn profile or I have a resume, I'll try and find some flags in the resume that I know I want to hit on because I know the manager's going to ask me, hey, why didn't this person work for 2 years here? Or why did they jump these 3 jobs within a year? I'll find those and then I'll find a way in the conversation to pick at those a little bit and get them talking about it. It's not just, hey, why did you leave these 3 jobs in 3 years? I'll figure out a way. If they don't tell me, and a lot of times the reason I start the way I start, they'll answer those questions before I ask them. Right. Most of what I'm asking or most of what I want to find out. And then where it makes sense in the conversation is because you listen to them and pick your questions out based on what they're saying. I'll find out the stuff I need to find out there. So it's not I don't like people I don't ask them to walk me down their resume. I just ask
That's
them.
the worst.
I just want to know, what do you do? What do you want to do? Because those are the two most important things.
Right, correct. I frequently do calls from the car, right? And I don't have a resume in front of me, and I'm driving, right? I'm on the Bluetooth. But I will tell
You told me that story the other day, and it's unbelievable that you then park and you remember the conversation.
Yeah, but I have conversations. I have conversations like Sonny just said, where I tell a candidate, I go, look, I have reviewed your resume. Trust me. I know what you do. If you quiz me, I can tell you some things, but I don't need to go through your resume piece by piece, job by job.
Right.
What'd you do here? Why'd you leave there? What'd you do here? Why'd you leave there? What'd you do here? I don't need all that. Give me a high level overview. What are you good at? What do you want to do? You've seen the position description. Let's say if they applied or if I send it to them, why do you think you're a good fit for this role? Mm-hmm. Let's have a conversation. Please don't walk me through every project and every line of code you ever wrote. Tell me what you're good at. Tell me what you want to do next. And we take it from there.
Bits and pieces of both. I do not ask them where they've been. We do identify on the call. I do have the resume in front of me. I know you're on your own company, so you're moving all the time. I'm at my desk most of the time, but when I do see,
and even if I'm at my desk, I typically don't have the resume. I still won't have the resume in front.
Yeah,
I don't like to get distracted by the resume. Again, if you're a new recruiter listener, I get it. You got to you're still learning.
Yeah.
But right. I'll review it. I'll digest it for a minute, 5 minutes. And then I kind of get the gist of this person is this kind of a skill set.
Yeah.
The resume can go off to the side and I'm walking around my office or maybe I'm sitting there with a notebook or chatting in the writing in the database. But I still, even if I'm not in the car, Alex, I don't have the resume in front of me. I try to not have the resume in front of me.
Yeah, I do, not to go through it, but to point out to them, here's how I flow. If we're speaking and compensation and location is not an issue, more than likely I am going to put you in front of the hiring manager.
You've already looked at the resume.
Right? Yeah. And
so those three metrics are lining up. Location, correct. Compensation, and potentially skill set, right?
No, I have to verify that.
Yeah, you got to verify that.
Right.
You've looked at those things.
Right. And so then I tell them, hey, I'm noticing a gap here. I'm like, I'm sure you have a good story to tell. Have your story down, because when you talk to the next person, they are going to more than likely ask you why. I don't need to know why, because I've been doing this for a long time. And if you tell me the truth or not, I would never know. Just have your story down. So I do call it out. I just don't want to be sitting there writing notes why they left. The only time I do write notes why people left is when I see a career progression. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. It's like if it's not a career progression, they just moved around for whatever reason. But if I see them made an elevated move in their career, I do want to know, because that's my pitch and my sale to that. That's how I sell the hiring manager. But I do not. So I just have them walk me through it.
Back to what you said about the notes. The thing that I take notes on, that I always find important is, hey, I was at this job and my manager left and he called me 2 weeks later.
Yes.
Me over there.
Yep,
I always want to know those things.
Yep.
Do people want to work with you again in the future? Because that means you were at least impressive to that person that had some say in what you do.
And that's what I was saying, is that when there's a feeling of, listen, after all these years, guys, you develop this gut feeling from the first 20 minutes, 30 seconds, you get a feeling for a candidate. And if I'm sensing that there was that type of movement, you're darn right I want to take notes on that, because I want to pitch that to the hiring manager saying, hey, they were pulled from this company. They were pulled from that company. They didn't just leave for more money or whatever. So
I think that's important to ferret out. And also it's happened more often than I would think it would happen, where I'm an agency side. I'm recruiting somebody for a 6-month engagement, right? Mm-hmm. And the hiring manager makes some comment at the client. Hey, this guy jumps around every 6 months. Well, the job you are engaging us for
6 months.
is for 6 months.
Exactly.
Like you want to hire him for 6 months, but you're mad that he jumps around every 6 months. Like that's you're offering the same job he's been jumping on. So maybe ferreting out whether, why the person left, got recruited away, or I'm just a career contractor, right, or whatever the case might be, is certainly important to the process.
I think it's also important to call it out, because I think, it's just my personal opinion, there's a lot of recruiters that are order takers. There's a lot of salespeople who are order takers. Given that we've been in this business for a long time, we know what that means. But it's important to put the candidate on notice. Like, hey, if something did happen within your career that you had to leave, have a good story to tell. Everybody loves a good story. We've all had things happen to us, Noel Wolf, how you and I met, right? So, it may have not been your fault. Don't make any excuses. My good friend Bob Anderson, you both know him. He told me this one saying once before that he practices when he shows up to a client call. He says, and he learned this from somebody else, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone. Don't sit there and start explaining why you left this job after 3.5 months because you did this and you did. Just own it. Own it and move on. Get off that subject. If it's that important, we'll bring you back. But typically, we're not going to bring you back.
Right.
But own it. Own everything on your resume and be prepared for every single question. That's one thing they take for granted, I think, candidates, is because of it's on their resume. They don't think they're going to be asked, and they just fill it up with stuff that is just irrelevant. We've seen resumes that are 7 pages long.
Right.
Woo.
Yeah, that's for a different podcast.
That's one prop candidate.
But resumes are not, recruiter at home, listener at home, your candidates are not resume writers. They're not English majors. They're not communication majors.
Right.
They're not, editors and writers. Certainly, we've got a lot of tools these days, whether it's, Word or a resume service that you subscribe to, who certainly can help. But as a recruiter, give a keen eye to what is in there in the conversation you're going to have. And if you need to, I call it data map, or enhance is the wrong word, because maybe that's sending the wrong message. Highlight a person's skill set. If you see something missing from the candidate's resume that you both discuss and is important to the hiring manager, you should incorporate that into the resume. I'm an agency side again, but I think it maybe applies internally too. Either have the candidate add those bullet points, or even you can add those bullet points. Sometimes it's a little easier for you're jotting notes and you're on the call with the candidate for you to add that bullet point or two that they missed. But you can't boil down a person's 20-year, 15-year work history effectively into a 3-page document. They've done a lot of stuff in 15 years, right. A lot of stuff in 5 years. And they highlighted A, B, and C, but forgot D, E, and F. You're on the phone with them. They need that. Client manager needs that as well. Please add that to the resume.
I'll add this
without being shady.
To that, here's the one thing I'll add, and this is something that I do all the time. Why isn't it on there? Do you actually want to do this? If it's not on your resume, right? Did you do it, or do you want to do it? Because you didn't feel it was important enough to put in that document.
Yep. But what about the argument of, well, if I would have put it on there, would have put my resume over 2.5 pages?
Well, that's a valid answer, but I think the question needs to be asked,
right? Because
there have been many. I don't think I do this. Maybe I'm sure I have somewhere in my career, but I see it again. Candidate responses on LinkedIn. This recruiter called me about a COBOL job. I've been a Java guy for 10 years. Well, you put COBOL
on your resume.
And not that he shouldn't put COBOL on his resume,
right?
But maybe in his skills summary,
right,
he put Java, COBOL. And in my mind, that infers order of preference or order of aptitude. It's like the ingredient list on a cereal box. For those of you who don't know at home, it's in order of how prevalent that ingredient is. So if it says sugar is the number one ingredient in your cereal,
better be first one.
That is the number one ingredient in your cereal.
Right.
And after that is corn. Right.
There's more sugar than anything else.
Right. So if a candidate puts Java, COBOL next, I might need to ask the question, and the candidate shouldn't get insulted when I ask about their COBOL experience. They're like, I'm a Java guy. Or girl, I've been doing this. Okay, well, you put COBOL in there. So the question needs to be asked, right? Why don't you have it in there? And a valid answer could be, well, I'm a Java person now. I don't do COBOL anymore. Perfect. Sounds good.
Let me throw you a curveball question.
Yeah.
Both of you. How long does it take you to read a resume before you decide to call somebody? And this is obviously for future podcasts for applicants, but if an applicant is listening, recruiter's listening, hiring manager's listening, how long does it take you to read a resume before you make a decision?
10 seconds.
Maybe 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Ooh, getting more patient.
Well, it's funny.
It depends. It does depend too, right? If there's times when I'm going through applicants, and if I have 20 applicants and I got to review them all, I'm going to burn right through and I'm going to find the prevalent information that I need to see, and I'm going to decide whether or not I want to make that call.
Do you put value in the summaries versus the skill area versus the job history?
Resumes have summaries. I don't read them. I'm kind of tongue in cheek, but I don't pay attention to objective or summary.
Where do you go to right away?
I immediately am going to being going to the technical skills summary if they have one, and the next couple of jobs. What did they do? And again, for the recruiter home listening, not what was the overall thing, but what did the person do specifically?
Right.
Because you'll find lots of resumes written that way where it says, worked for Bank of America, a $5 billion bank who does lending and blah, 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 and blah.
We know that. Thank you.
Our team was responsible for this, that, and the other thing, blah, blah. And then you get to the end, you're like, okay, but I don't know what you do. This person did. What did you do on this project? And I might still call that person if, again, depending on skill set and length of tenure at the job. I mean, I assume they did something if they're at Bank of America for 4 years. Okay. But they're just, again, not great at resume writing, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm going to have to ask them, okay, I see what your team did, and your team used Java, Strut, Spring, Hibernate, AW. That's great. What did you do? What was your contribution? Because I need to get that into the resume.
So very important. Noel, repeat that one more time. The very last part.
What did you do?
What did you do?
What did you do?
So important, because you know how some of these candidates are. They will get you going, and you're like, what, what did you do? Right. I mean, they just take you on a road of no return, and you're like, okay, come back. What number of 50 developers were you, and what did you do?
I mean, it's like, I'm trying to come up with an analogy. It's like describing the Sears Tower, right? I was on the team that built the Sears Tower. The Sears Tower is a 110 floor building in downtown Chicago that has blah, blah, blah square feet and blah. You could talk about the Sears Tower all day. No, hold on. Let's back it. What did you do as part of that team? Yeah. Oh, I was a welder and I did welds all day, right? I was an iron worker. Okay. Now we're getting to what did you
weld all 110 floors?
What did you do there? Yeah. And how are you going to bring that to the next?
The HVAC system?
Right. And how are you going to bring that to the next company? Right. What did you do and how are you bringing it to the next company?
And that's important to call out. I know we've all been there, right? Your first 20, 30 phone calls when you were just starting out, you were scared to death to ask questions. If they were talking to you, you're like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Oh my goodness. But if I would have had the same coaching back then that I've developed over the years now and asking questions of my friends, I would have been more inquisitive earlier on, like probably from day one. Tell me what you've done. Right. Because it helps build credibility. And I think it helps build your confidence level. Like right now, my phone rings and I don't care if it's a CEO of a company or a help desk technician. My confidence level and knowledge of the industry and the business is super high. And I know it's over the years, but I just feel that we're in such a hurry to teach recruiters how to recruit. We don't do as good of a job in teaching them how to have some confidence in themselves and just to kind of just rein it in a little bit, not be a yes man or a yes woman from the beginning.
So 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, when I said, let's back it up and go back to the beginning, that's an important part, that confidence piece. So as a new recruiter, how do you get the confidence to pick up a phone and call a stranger, right? It's a little intimidating.
Still is.
I don't know. Are you still? I'm not.
Well, no, but my intimidation level is built with confidence. I mean, when I pick up a phone, I'm calling somebody that I need, that I'm going to be like, hey, closing from phone call one, take a deep breath. I studied their resume or their profile, going back to earlier, how I would do it. I got to have
your heart's still racing a little bit. You're still
not necessarily racing, but I do put a little bit of more thought process in it because I have one shot with that candidate, right? And I know, and they know it, but I own the phone call, right? And if I feel like they're trying to take that phone call away from me, I bring it back right away by saying things like, oh, well, I guess, it's been nice meeting you. Doesn't sound like you may be interested. Whoa, whoa, whoa. As soon as you start using that logic with them, all of a sudden.
Takeaway,
yeah, a takeaway to try to, again, it's the same thing to our previous podcast. Are you serious about my time is valuable too. Yep. I've said this before, I think on our previous conversation podcast, one way or another, I am going to fill this job. It just two things are dependent. If it's going to be you and how long it's going to take. But I am going to, one way or another, we are going to hire this person.
Right.
Help me make it you. And if not, we'll part as friends. Who do you know? Can I help you with your search? Maybe I'll take a look at your resume. I try to build a relationship with them. I mean, it's not everybody because there's just not enough time. But I try to own the phone call and own the relationship and let them know that I'm not just in it because I want to place them. I'm not just in it because I need a hire. I really, truly want them to know that, hey, I care. And if you don't care, then I don't care. And if I don't care, I can't be your ambassador. I can't do it.
That's a great point. And I think where newer recruiters often fail is they're so excited to have someone on the phone that could do the job. They're afraid to ask those questions that will disqualify the candidate, right? They're afraid to push on, you used location earlier, right? Nowadays, it doesn't mean as much because most people are working remotely.
Right.
But, when you had a contract in an office and that job was in Oak Brook, I would never say, hey, will you go to Oak Brook? My question was, where do you want to work? It lives in Northbrook, which is not a commutable distance for listener at home who doesn't know the Chicago area. But it would always be, where do you want to work? Well, I need about a half an hour. Half an hour. This job's in Oak Brook. Would you go to Oak Brook? Oh, yeah, I'll go to Oak Brook. I'm like, no, that's twice as long of a ride as you just said it was. Why?
Right.
Tell me why, because you're going to have to convince me now that you're willing to go there. And meanwhile, I'm kicking myself because I know this person's perfect, but I got to move on to the next person because they're not going to make the drive or comp or anything like those specific things. Right?
But you also don't know that they may have, I've had this happen. Yeah, you can tell where they've worked, but they can tell you, oh, I love going to Oak Brook Shopping Mall. My cousin lives in Oak Brook. My wife and I's favorite restaurant in Oak Brook. And you know what? If this opportunity is really that good, yeah, I can drive an extra 20 minutes. But what you just said is magical.
You got to make them do it. You got to make them tell you why. Right.
Correct. And you did that takeaway, right? You did that takeaway, but more importantly, it's not a takeaway to be tricky and have you buy a vacuum cleaner you don't need. It's a takeaway to help you as a recruiter do a better job with your hiring manager, your candidate, your client. But more importantly, show the candidate that you care about their commute, right? That you truly care. Hey, listen, man, it's a 40-minute drive. Are you sure? What about your child's soccer practice? Or are you going to be missing some dinners? Are you cool with that? And have them tell you. That was an excellent point.
I think there's lots of the things on our checklist or intake list that we need to find out where those flex points are for a candidate, right? Where a candidate says, I need to be at, $140,000 a year. And, new recruiter at home, you can just write that down and move on. Or you can be like, totally get it. And I, as your advocate, I will get you the best possible offer. But if it push comes to shove, you love them, they like you, and hypothetically, they offer you 132, and work from home 2 days a week. What are your thoughts on that? Again, you're not backing them into a corner. You don't have to, like, obviously you're not making them an offer. This is an initial conversation.
Right.
And tell the candidate, look, I'm not making you an offer. I'm just trying to understand where you're at with things. And you may find out the person who wants 140 to go to the city every day will take 130 to be at home 3 days a week and in the office only twice a week. There's flex there. Or a candidate may want more money to go to an unnamed company, but, like a non-name brand company, so to speak, but they'll take less money to put Google on their resume, let's say. So you got to ask there are definitely questions on the checklist that you want to not challenge them, but see where the flex points are. Yeah. Are you sure you want to drive that? Are you sure that salary is good for you? And I always phrase some of these questions. For example, notice period. That's always one I always ask a candidate, right? And we'll go through what the checklist looks like for me and for you guys. But I always ask candidate, like, if this goes the way we all want it to go, you like them, they like you, an offer's presented, what does this look like on your end? Is it just a normal 2 weeks notice? Or is it a 3 weeks notice? You have vacation plan? You got a wedding coming up? And just so you know, there's no wrong answer here. Right. If they decide they want you, they'll figure it out. They want the right person, not the person who happens to be available. I use that line all the time. They want the right person, not the person that's available right this second. So if you tell me I need a 3 weeks notice and then I have a trip to Iceland for 2 weeks, so it's 5 weeks out, the right client will wait the 5 weeks for that right candidate.
But it also helps build integrity and credibility from day one.
Right.
You're being transparent from day one. Don't accept the offer and say, "Oh, by the way, I forgot." You didn't forget.
By the way, I got 3 weeks off. Yeah,
you didn't forget.
Right.
Don't put. And again, it's one of those early on conversations, or as you see a candidate moving through the interview process and they're going into the final interview, and I have that final debrief. Doesn't happen all the time, but for some of the difficult closes, I have a final debrief. Hey, you're going in for the finals. Has anything happened in the last week or two that I need to be aware of?
Right.
Please, because the more surprises you give me,
right,
the worse you're making me look bad, and I like to look good.
Do you have an offer in hand already from a different company?
Yeah.
Did your wife get transferred to Denver?
Right.
And you're going to take the interview just in case. No, she got transferred to Denver. You're leaving. You're not taking this job.
Well, case in point, Tony's recent job off, right? I don't know if we've had this conversation, Sonny, but throughout the interview process, there were bumps in our personal life that happened. And Tony's first reaction was, I'm not going to waste their time. I'm just going to pull out. I said, hold on a second. I said, these are valid points. Let them make that decision. Just be transparent. So she called. She had a conversation. She was transparent. They appreciated the transparency. Fast forward, here we are. She got the offer. I'm sure there were other reasons why, but transparency is so important. Don't hide stuff, because one way or another, we or your new company are going to find out.
So on our intake form for our recruiters, we're putting our notes together the way we, if we're training them properly, we call them yellow flags. Obviously, red flags, candidates out, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't fit the compensation. The red flag doesn't necessarily mean bad. Just could be a showstopper, right? Job only pays 120. Candidates make it 180. They're out.
Right.
Like, it's not even a red flag. You're not going to present that candidate. Move on. However, yellow flags are flex points. And I want to make, again, agency side, you guys can speak to internal side, agency side. I want to make my salesperson, my account manager, aware of the yellow flags that I see.
Yeah.
And they can, in turn, if necessary, if they make a decision to present to the client and get the candidate involved with the client, they can also relay those yellow flags. Like, here's why they fit, but here's something you're going to need to take into consideration. Could be
explore further. I like to use the word explore, because if you, and it's very important, because I've been in a situation where I was being a good corporate recruiter or whatever recruiter contract, or even a outside vendor. Here are the greens, here are the yellows, and here are the reds. And the reds would always just put the client into a negative frame of mind. Right. And so I use that a little bit differently now.
So no more yellow. It's investigate further.
Yes. Yeah. You should be curious enough to talk to that person. So I tell them, I'm like, hey, I got a sense, or we talked about this. I feel they gave me a really good answer, but poke this a little bit further.
Right.
Don't make a big deal out of it, but just be like, hey, and by the way, Alex shared with me.
Right.
And I let them know, I'm like, hey, just what you're telling me, I'm going to be sharing. Right. So I think it's important.
Like this commute thing, Sonny, is probably a good case in point, right? You're talking to a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I think this candidate's a great fit. He initially did say,
right,
he wanted a 25-minute commute. This job's in Oak Brook. It's double that. Again, he says he's saying the right things, but I will tell you, initially, he told me this. He's willing to do that, but it's something we need to investigate further.
And what credibility again with the candidate?
Right.
Credibility again with the client.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Look, you want to, I think we mentioned this last week, and you don't want to miss out on a great candidate because you didn't ask a couple of more questions to find out those flex points and find out what actually could work, right? You don't want to miss out on great people for that. And as long as you let the hiring manager know, or you let the candidate know certain things about the job and vice versa, you continue to keep that credibility with either side by pointing out the fact that, hey, I know this isn't ideal, but these are the things that I think you should really give this person a shot, or you should really give this job a shot because of this, and this as well.
Mm-hmm. So you're also calling out some of the yellow flags on the job side.
Oh, for sure.
And not necessarily shying away from them.
That's actually a key too. Recruiter at home, listener at home, when you're on the phone with a candidate, it's not all rainbows and unicorns.
Nope.
Like, again, especially if you're aware of investigate further item, a yellow flag, you looked at the client's Glassdoor reviews, or you just became privy to some information. They had some layoffs recently, or their stock price took a tumble. Don't call a candidate and paint, again, rainbows and butterflies. Acknowledge, because again, you're going to have candidates every once in a while. Why is the position open? Well, they fired the last 3 guys. Okay. Address that. The candidate's going to ask you, God forbid they get the job and then find out some nonsense that you oversold, the client oversold.
Yeah.
Now you have a bad name. They have a bad name. Again, investigate further. I'm going to keep using that, Alex. So investigate further items, yellow flag items. Tell the candidates, okay, just tell them. Don't get them involved in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Everybody has, look, there are candidates I've talked to in the past where I thought that the environment they would be getting into was a very chaotic, tumultuous, things are going crazy. The right candidate will see that as an opportunity.
Yep.
Oh, the building's always on fire? Well, I'm really good at fire diagnosis and firefighting. I would love that job. Okay. Whereas somebody else would be like, oh, they're always fighting fires? Yeah, I'm out. No problem. So
Good. We just saved 3 weeks of time. Yeah.
Right. You ferreted out the wrong person, but the other person said, oh, I totally love fires.
Yeah.
Get them in there. Let's make it happen. Sonny, so you've hired and trained recruiters, and not, you can weigh it too, Alex, obviously, but how do you instill that confidence for a really fresh new recruiter as they get on the phone with a stranger?
It does take time. It takes time doing it, right? The more conversations that you have or that you can encourage them to have, the more comfort they'll get, the more comfortable they'll get in those conversations, right?
Sure.
So for me, I hated it when I was a new recruiter, but if I have to, when I have junior people, I'll role play them. I'll have them call me, and I will still do some role plays to say, hey, I'm going to throw curveballs at you. Remember the things we talked about to hit, right? The points to hit so that you can cover those things and ask those questions. The other thing too, that I think you really have to instill, and I just said it a few minutes ago, they got to be able to walk away from a candidate that they think they're going to hire. If they see those things that are there, and as long as you have that knowledge and you believe it and you know, hey, I'm good enough, I'll go find the next person.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's less at stake in those calls if you have that, right?
And again, it's transparency. Yeah. Tell them early on, hey, I'd be wasting your time if we went any further because
I know I can talk you into this job, but that's not going to do either of us any good.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if there's something,
this is what you really interview process.
Right. That's the biggest.
Or if there's things on their resumes or location or compensation that they're trying to convince themselves of that will work, just tell them, hey, you know what? I can probably get you this interview, and I know you're going to have a call, but we've already screened 5, 6, 7 people. We've made other offers to similar profiles. I would be wasting your time if we went any further. However, I like what I'm hearing. I think you may be a better fit somewhere else. Let's talk again soon. Please stay in touch.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the thank yous that come out of that. Sure. Instant LinkedIn connections, referrals. Hey, Alex, I like the way you handled this call. Thank you for not wasting my time. Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. I didn't do anything special. Right. I don't have a magic black book in my pocket of the right things to say. Just like we talked about earlier, do the right things and good things will happen.
So I asked you the question. I'll give you my answer too, Sonny, on how you instill confidence. So I think you can't magically make this happen, but I've tried to tell our team, you need to view this profession and your role as important, as a professional role. You're not calling a candidate to give them something they don't need.
Correct.
At some point in their future, they are going to interview somewhere for some job. Could be 6 months from now, could be 5 years from now. Everybody changes jobs.
Could be 6 minutes from
you're talking to a recruiter. You're looking for a job. You're going to go somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is the days of, my parents, our parents working somewhere for 50 years, that just doesn't happen anymore. Right. So everybody's going to change a job. Why not have a conversation with a recruiter? So as a recruiter, why not have a conversation with a candidate? You're not calling to sell them car insurance. You're not, by the way, I'm sure that's, very valuable.
Steak knives.
Steak knives. You're not calling them that, or what's this new thing people make fun of? Car warranties. Like, you are calling that you could, and I mentioned some, maybe on podcast 1 or 2, Alex, I don't remember, you could be helping someone make a life-changing, to the positive, life-changing decision. Compensation, the right company, get off the road, a promotion, a million reasons.
A job that's not been posted, only you know about.
Right. I mean, there's a million reasons that you should be confident making that phone call. You're not bothering that person. Look, will you get the occasional person that you catch at the wrong day, the wrong time, or that has a bad perception of recruiters, which again, there's recruiters, internal, external. You're going to, these days, you're probably talking to a recruiter before you talk to anybody else. So, you're going to have to do it, but it doesn't hurt. Take 10 minutes, have the conversation, or, and again, in 10 minutes, you can ferret out they're truly not interested. But the fact is, if you hire for a particular kind of person and you're talking to that person, obviously you already read the resume, read the LinkedIn profile, you may want to talk to them again 6 months from now, a year from now. It's not a wasted part of your day to call somebody who says they're not interested.
Right.
It's okay. Look, flip side, other side, again, being an agency, we talk to potential clients all the time, right? And they're like, we got vendors. We're good. We don't need anybody. And I always joke with them, well, I'm not going anywhere. So when you need me a year from now, I'll be at my desk. Give me a call. Or 5 years from now, I'll still be here, and I'll still be hiring people, and you'll still need to hire people, and I'll still be here for you. So as a recruiter making those outbound calls, don't be afraid that the candidate you call goes, yeah, I'm super happy. I'm not looking for a job. Now, we can get into later on some approaches to even combat that, where you're like, oh, really? You're super happy? Mm-hmm. So if I offered you $190,000 and you could work from home and I gave you stock options, you don't want to have this you don't want to continue to have this call?
What would be better?
Right.
Something's better. Right. You tell me what would be better. What does that look like? What does better look like?
Yeah. So don't be afraid to have that conversation. You're just having a professional call. You are a professional. They are a professional. Have the conversation. Don't be afraid to make the call. Don't be nervous. And to what you said early on, Sonny, in that answer, repetition. Have call, recruiter at home, you more than likely are a millennial or maybe a Gen, what are they today? Y, Zs, what's the mid-20s, 30s? Look, you're likely just getting into this profession and you're, 23 to 35. Maybe you're a career changer a little older. But the fact is, our business ultimately converges at the telephone. You can send out emails. You could put postings on LinkedIn. You could send in-mails. You can send text messages. You can do all sorts of electronic stuff. But the reality is you're going to have to get on the phone. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone, make the calls, make the dials, talk to people every day. And it will get just more comfortable and easy over time. I made this comment or this joke earlier in the episode 1 or 2. My recruiter said, how long till I'm good at this? And I said, 5 years. It'll be a long time. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone. It may take you a little while. Some take it to it naturally, just gregarious, outgoing, pick up the phone, yuck it up, laugh, converse, and go through the checklist. And other people take a little more, they think they're imposing on the person. And I'm calling them over lunch. Well, guess what? They're probably at lunch.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You probably can get a hold of them over lunch.
Is there ever a good time for you to get a recruiting call? No. Never. No. You're always in the middle of something.
So here, guys, I'm going to go through what I give our team as a checklist. Let me know if you would add anything or something missing. So and the way this works, recruiter at home, listener, is when our recruiters do their intake call with the candidate, they're going through their checklist. Again, you don't have to go through 1 through 15 in order, but the data we want to get out of it that we then pass along to our hiring managers or our clients are the location of the candidate in relation to the client, right? Are they able to work in the office? Do they have expectations of full-time remote or hybrid? That's certainly important these days. Travel commitment or expectations, if any, depends on the job, right? If the job has a travel component, you obviously need to investigate that with the candidate, whether they're able to do that. We always are, internal, you guys will have to give your view, but external as sometimes we have people going as consultants, sometimes full-time hires. Communication skills are important to us. So verbal communication skills, written communication skills, and interpersonal skills. So, that's important to us. We always kind of gauge communication skills, ability to interview. When are they available? Are they available? And again, for us, we try to get defined data. They're available tomorrow, 12 to 5, and they're available the day after from 8 to 10. They're available whenever. That sometimes does happen. Somebody's not working. They may say, I can do most any time as long as you give me 24-hour notice. That's an acceptable answer. Right. So available to interview, availability to start. We talked about that earlier. And I always throw out to the candidates, you don't have to tell me 2 weeks notice if it's not 2 weeks notice. Tell me the real answer. Is it 2 weeks notice? Perfect. Good. If it's 1 week because your boss is going to fire you after you give notice, that's cool too. If it's 5 weeks, that's cool too. But give me the answer. Rate or salary. Right. And in certain states, you can't ask what they make today, but you can get to where do they want to be and how does that fit into the parameters of your open role. Current job search status. That's important for us. We always want to know, I say, so in our process, here's where we are. Where am I at in your process? Right. The candidate has their own thing. Don't ever think you're the only game in town. That candidate, especially if they're an active candidate, they are talking to every person like you that calls them. They are picking up the phone. They are interviewing. They may have offers in hand already. So I always want to know, where do we stand in the race? Are we just getting to the race and you have 3 offers in hand? Well, let's just move on. Like, that's not going to happen. Or, no, I just started looking. I just put my resume online today, very early on. Well, I know I have that candidate all to myself, at least for the time being, right? So where do they stand? Certainly as an agency, have they been interviewed or submitted to any of our clients, in particular, the one I'm calling you about? Like, don't be, again, naive enough to not ask that question, that you have a candidate inside information. Candidates may lie to you. They may. Or alternatively, if they're not lying, they may not remember. And you may think that's BS, but the reality is when a candidate is on an active hunt, right? They got to pay their mortgage. They got laid off. They are applying to everything they find on LinkedIn, Indeed, Dice, Monster, ZipRecruiter. They're applying to 1,000 jobs. Maybe they're advanced and they have an Excel spreadsheet. They're keeping track of all this stuff, but it's worth asking the question. Have you ever applied or interviewed with Acme Corporation in the past 30 days, 60 days, or 2 years? Let them answer the question. If there are any multiple short-term roles, we always ask about that. Any of these worth investigating questions? If you see anything on the resume that becomes apparent, and then obviously, usually it's on the resume, but phone number, email, things of that nature. Sometimes you're looking at a LinkedIn profile, you don't have that. For our team, we like to capture the actual contact information for the candidate, because that will live in what's the word? It'll live forever. Like, whereas my LinkedIn account may not, right? If I stop paying my LinkedIn bill tomorrow, I don't get to send you emails anymore. But if you gave me your phone number and your email, well, now I can get a hold of you. So I want your actual contact information. Agree, disagree? Any additional information? What else are you looking for, son? Yeah, go ahead.
We background check.
Okay.
So I always ask, hey, we're going to run a background check. We're going to check your criminal history, your career history, just like employment verification, education verification. Sometimes places do credit checks, make sure that they're financially not criminals. They pay their bills. Yep. Most times you get, no problem. Every now and then you'll get, well, I had this or whatever. It might be an issue. But then right? That's coming up and they know they're going to have to do it. Right. So I'll always throw the background check in there too.
And so kind of a side note, but related to that, Sonny. So that we just talked about all the information we gather from a candidate. One thing I always make sure my team gives them is what is the interview process? What's the forward-looking process, and that background check could be part of it, right? Yep. So we say, okay, now that we've agreed that this could be a good situation, here's what's going to happen from here on out. Right. I'm going to get your resume to here. This particular client has a phone screen, and then a Zoom, and then an in-person, and then a drug test, and a background check, and just describe whatever it is. Yeah. Full transparency. Give them a heads up. Let them know what's going on. But that's an important one. Is if there's a background check, credit check, drug, whatever the case is. Prepare them for that early. What do you anything different than that, Alex, for your clients?
No, I think so.
When you're putting notes together for an internal manager, this is similar.
Very similar. I don't think you guys have pretty much hit it on all. And the key thing for me to walk away with: what is the best way for me to get a hold of you? Yep. Okay. Do you want me to call? Okay. If you don't pick up, can I then hang up and text you and email you? What is the best? I'm not a big texter. I think it's a little bit impersonal. Yeah. Well, text me. No. I'll either call you or email you. I just think texting is a little bit impersonal, but then
wait. I text all the time.
Wait a minute. You just said you're going to ask them what the best way is to do it. If they say texting, aren't you going to align with that?
No. What I'm saying, what I said is phone or email. Okay. If they say texting, it's not my preferred method.
It's not your preferred method.
Not my preferred method. I don't want.
But that doesn't matter to the candidate. You got to find out what their preferred method is, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But if you gave me three, and I know you're laughing, but I don't want to be texted. Hey, Alex, what is the status of my interview? And I don't want to text you with the status of your interview. Here's why. I keep a better queue of things that I need to do. I've talked about this early on in Outlook. Okay. I think we talked about it 2 episodes ago. Outlook for me is my guide, my database, my everything. I just like keeping things tidy in there. I mark it as red as if I need to follow up. Best way for me to communicate back to you is via phone, message, voicemail, and or email. Okay. Some of them say, hey, Alex, please text me. I'm like, okay, maybe, but I prefer not to because I just feel that the communication via phone or email is best.
It's so prevalent now, though. Like, I know I would never give feedback in a text, right? I wouldn't say, hey, you didn't get the job over a text, but hey, manager has to change the interview. Can you do this time? just because it's so much quicker and so
Right.
much easier, especially people that are working. If they're in an office, it's easier for them to shoot a text to say, hey, I could do it Wednesday.
Versus getting an email alert.
Well, that text is right there and there. Yeah. I think it's quicker.
It definitely is quicker, and that's not to discourage you or the listener.
And it's
at
not
all,
it's not a,
but a phone call is an investment in time, right? You got to go through the pleasantries. Hey, Joe, it's Alex. Hey, Alex, what's going on? Hey, I think it's a 2-minute. It's at least a 2-minute call.
Yeah.
Right? 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Email next, further down the line. I got to pull up Outlook. I got to start a new email. I got to have the candidate's email address. I got to write a subject. Hey, we need to reschedule the interview. If you're like me, I'm writing an actual letter. Like, hey, Joe, just wanted to let you know the manager. Okay, now we're at a minute. So phone calls 2 minutes, emails 1 minute, text message. Hey, it's Noel. Manager needs to change to tomorrow. Good. Very impersonal in 20 seconds. And again, I'm not challenging you. I'm kind of just investment of time, phone call.
Yeah.
You're going to be on the phone with the candidate.
Yeah.
At least 2 minutes, if not 5. You get somebody who jibber jabbers. And they want to talk about the Bears game, and they want to talk about the weather, and they want to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I don't disagree. I think I mentioned this earlier, and you guys know I'm always willing to learn new things.
That's what we're here for, Alex. We're here to teach you.
trying to get better at recruiting.
Trying to get better at recruiting. Yeah, it's working already.
So let's wrap real quickly.
I got one thing too that I always ask, and
Go
I
ahead.
do ask this because I've been corporate for so long. I always ask candidates, and this isn't necessarily a checklist thing, but when they have questions, I always ask, hey, what questions do you have for me?
Yeah.
And I always want to know if they did a little research on us.
Yep.
Passive candidates, not as much so, but anybody we get applicants, I want to know that they've at least invested some time to look at our website, know who we are, know what we do. If I get the question like, so you're at Devo, what do you guys do? I'm like, well, it's Devo, and why don't you know what we do? You knew this call was happening 2 days ago. You didn't just go to devo.com and see that we're, in data logging and cybersecurity.
Right.
That stuff I want to know. And I will take a candidate that's an applicant in the first call that says, I didn't get a chance. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, go ahead and do that research and shoot me a note. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I'll stop the conversation right there because they're obviously not, they haven't invested 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend 15 minutes educating you.
Right.
Right.
Why not, Sonny? Help me understand why.
I'm happy to. So I think one thing, and we haven't really mentioned this, I don't think in any of the podcasts, but I will throw little tests out there just to gauge interest, gauge commitment. And one of them is I want to know that you did some research on us, right? If I don't have a resume, I need your resume and I need it. Could you get it to me by tomorrow into business? And that's a little test. I want to see that they're going to be punctual on it, right? That's why I schedule 99% of my calls these days, because I want to see that they looked at their calendar and they knew I was calling, right? I don't want to call someone on a scheduled call and be like, who's what? I'm like, no, we set this call up. Maybe there's a better time. You let me know when you want to talk. And then, they're not willing to put that time in. Then again, like I said before, I got to be ready to look for the next person.
Yep.
Yeah, we definitely have, that's probably a good way, Sonny, of ferreting out like difficult candidates. So recruiter at home, you're going to come across, so there are jerks, for lack of a better word. And then there are difficult candidates. And then there are obviously people who are great to work with. Yeah. Difficult candidates can actually be okay.
Absolutely.
Some of them are just very structured in their process or their decision-making process. We had a guy we placed recently who we think he had Asperger's. I'm no clinician, but he was very kind of dry, very, to the point with his questions but also super amazingly intelligent. But, I remember telling one of our recruiters, hey, we need somebody who fits into this kind of culture, blah, blah, blah. And then Jim's like, no. You got to understand, like, it's different. This person's going to be doing like really deep thought algorithms and things. And it may not be what you're thinking, Noel. And then we talked to this person but he also was very matter of fact. The recruiter kept trying to like build a rapport and make jokes. No jokes happening. And it's not that the candidate was not, that's just not his thing.
Wasn't their personality.
You will find other candidates. These are the candidates I would cut loose, are people who are jerks. You will find there are people who don't value you as a part of the process, who see you as just I don't know what you're just
You're an impediment.
that's a great word, impediment to them getting in the process or completing the process. They can't get off the phone with you quick enough. Put me on the phone with the manager. All right, calm down. I'm going to get through my checklist first because you're not, and we basically are the bouncer at a VIP club. Like, I'm getting in the club. Listen, you might think I'm just the bouncer. I'm paid minimum wage. You're not getting in this club until I decide you're getting in this club.
Right.
So, like, everybody, calm down. So you'll meet jerks. You need to pass them by. But I do think those small trials, could be valuable. One thing we didn't talk about, and we're kind of short on time. I don't want to make this pod any longer than it was one of the things I don't believe we touched on was information we give to a candidate. So in our script, so to speak, ours is kind of the script I teach is threefold. One is, hello, Miss Candidate. I'm Noel with Collinwood. Have you ever heard of Collinwood? That's my first thing. Have you ever heard of us? And even though we're an outcheck agency, I want the candidate to know a snippet about who we are and who they're dealing with. A little bit of branding, but mostly so they know us, they trust us. I'm not just jumping into the job. So we talk about that. And then I say, came across your resume. Here's what we're talking about. And I will very quickly throw out the client name. I know some staffing firms don't do that.
Right.
We go right to it. Like, what am I hiding by saying it's Blue Cross Blue Shield in the city? There's 1 million managers and thousands of employees. So I'm like, hey, it's Blue Cross. Here's the job. Have you ever heard of them? Sometimes it's a company you never heard. Like Morningstar is a client of ours. Hopefully they don't mind me throwing that out here, but I'll say, have you ever heard of Morningstar? 40% of the people have heard of it. 60 have not. And some of them think it's a vegan food company that makes like chicken patties. Oh, Morningstar, the chicken patty. No, not that one. The other Morningstar. So you have to educate them a little bit. Morningstar is a market research in the financial services. Here's how many employees they have. Okay. Their offices in the city. So I educate them on that. And then we start getting into the resume. But I push some information out. I know you mentioned you want to gather information first, but how deep do you get into the information giving? And at what point in your script / process do you get that out there?
So if my typical screen is a half an hour, I try to get the candidates talking for the first 10, 12 minutes about themselves and what they want to do.
Okay.
And then I'll take a little break at that point. Just be like, hey, you know what? You've been talking a lot. What questions you have for me? I'll do some talking. And no matter what the first question is, I'll usually start with a little 2 minutes about Devo, what we do, where we came from, what our company is. I'll answer their question. We'll go through their questions. I'll come back to some stuff that I wanted to come back to. Opposite of Alex, I usually close with comp just because the level of interest I have and the candidate has will dictate how deep I go into comp, right? I'm not gonna beat somebody up about what they want to make or what their expectations are if I don't think I'm going to move forward with them. I'll ask them, and if they're a marginal candidate and I'm not sure or I don't think they're going to be a fit, I'll just ask them, and if they don't want to divulge, I'll just let it go. But if there's someone I want to work with, I'll push a little bit harder to get them to give me their expectations before I tell them what the range is, because the ranges are crazy and it doesn't always, they're not typically black and white at most places, right? It's, if you're great,
because you can level up
and you're 20 grand more, I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I want to know that as opposed to telling them that, right?
We just had a client move from, this is over the course of 3 months, moved for the exact same role, right? Senior software engineer, moved from 140 to 170 because the market, they went into it with, we want to be at 140. We said, we'll see, we'll give it a try. We don't think that's appropriate, but we'll see. And based on our presental of candidates, we gave them the right of refusal. We're like, here's a perfect candidate. They're at 170. Here's a perfect candidate. They're 165. Here's perfect. And they, in the beginning, turned those folks down. Like, yeah, that salary, we think they're great. Salary's out of the range. Right. Well, 3 months later, their internal team's not coming up with anybody. The people we present are no longer available. And now they're like, okay, we were wrong. We need to move that number. Now, had they done it 3 months ago, we'd have some hires out there. But you're right. You can't just summarily go, oh, you're out of range. Let's move on. Right. Things could change over time.
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, you give them the answer. Hey, we'll pay up to 180. Looking for 180, buddy.
Right.
That's what I need. So you guys just got to try and figure it out.
I once told a candidate, I go, as long as it's not anything crazy like 250K, we're going to be okay. Well, hold on. 2 calls later, after 2 interviews, and he's being kludgy about the compensation, I go, hey, they're really interested. They want to hire you. What do you think you want to be? He goes, I think I want to be at that 250 you mentioned. I go, no, that was sarcasm, dude. Like I was being sarcastic. I said, as long as you're not something crazy like 250. He goes, no, that's where I want to be. Come on, you're not serious. He was like,
that's why I always ask in the first 10 minutes. It's not because I don't want to share with them. I know the range most of the time.
Yeah.
Sorry, all of the time.
Yeah.
And they start dancing around the range and this and that. And I always pause. I said, okay, you can tell me that now, or I'm going to keep asking you different questions. And I said, and this is so funny. Like, let me give you the 3 reasons why you're not telling me your compensation. 1, you're afraid that you're going to tell me a number that's way too high. Don't worry. Nobody besides me and you is going to know what type of range you're looking for until we're ready to make you an offer. Because if you help me do my job, you gain credibility. The manager knows that if I submitted you, you're within the range. Don't make me submit you and then throw a curveball at me. You're going to make me look stupid. And Alex doesn't like to look stupid.
Right.
It drives me bananas. Right. So anyways, we go around that dance and inevitably they're like, okay, fine, here it is. And now we legally have to tell people what the range is. So I like to have this. I like to have this dance with them. It usually sometimes takes 10 minutes because they're just like, well, what is your range? Well, my range is between 130 and 160. And 160, you need to be perfect. But you also need to be prepared to take an offer below 130 because this may be an opportunity for you to up-level yourself.
right.
So what are you looking for? Let's have a conversation between you and I. I promise you, nobody's going to ask me. They don't care as long as I submit you. So,
But you said there were 3 reasons that a person may not want to answer it. You said 1 was
Too high.
they think they might be too high.
okay.
They don't want to lowball themselves. That's another
Was
one.
lowball be another one? You said there were 3 reasons.
Did I say 3?
Yeah, you said 3.
2.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you then on that.
Yes, sir.
You asked them about their comp right off the bat. How do you know they're worth it if you haven't really heard about what they do?
Because now my decision to make it,
Well, they got to have a certain skill set. They got to be able to fit, right? So if
Right.
someone gives you the top end of the range and then you go through your next 20 minutes of the call
right.
and they're not worth it,
For me, it's not my job to decide if they're worth it or not. My job is to decide if it's worth my team's time to interview them. So if I think, you know what? Okay, let's give it a shot. But Sonny, you need to know that if you want that 160 top range, you better bring your A game. I don't say you better because, what do I know about what they do? Bring your A game and fight for that. Help them understand why you're worth it, not me. For me, if I'm moving forward, they're worth it. And what am I looking at? Worth my client's time.
Yeah.
I want to know. I don't want you, Sonny, as my client to come back to me and say, Alex, dude, come on. Really? You submitted this person to me? They'll never say that to me because you and I probably had a conversation on why you should interview this person because I'm a little bit soft. Or I thought that they were really good and they fit within your range, so, and it works.
So you wouldn't submit that guy that says they're worth X, but then after your conversation, you don't really think they have the experience or the skill set to get there.
I would tell them, hey, listen, based on what I'm hearing, you're probably the next level up. How would you like to proceed? And I always tell them, this is again, it's not a trick. By the time we hang up this phone call, Mr. Candidate, we are both going to decide if this is the right opportunity for you to move forward. Very important. We both have to decide. Me and you need to say this is worth my time, and me saying it's worth you meeting my team.
Right.
Because I hate looking bad. You do sometimes look bad because we're all human. We make mistakes, but I try to limit those all the time.
The conversations that make me laugh, but also frustrate me are the ones where you tell a candidate somewhere, whether you candle it early or late, they go, I want to be at 160, let's say. Yeah. Somehow in the conversation, you're like, well, the top end's only 120. And they're like, oh, I can do 120. You're like, you just said, what? Right. You just dropped $40,000?
Yeah, fight for 160. Right. Go fight for 160. Can I come back real quick before we close this out? Both of you, we talked about, how to get a recruiter comfortable.
Yeah.
When I do my cold calls or sourcing, I try to block it in 30, 45 minute intervals. And I've just recently started doing this in the last year and a half. And my game gets better with every dial. So I leave a message. I'm like, So by the time I make 30 whatever dials, or by the time I send 30 messages out, I'm always improving my message. I'm always improving it. Then that helps build confidence. Going back to your earlier point, Noel, if you don't pick up that phone and start dialing people and you're a great emailer or a great texter, whatever your technical shtick is, I promise you will trip over your tongue once that phone rings back. You got to talk to somebody at one point.
Right.
Still the most important tool we have is a phone.
Still, and I think the biggest mistakes that younger Alex made is that I wasn't consistent with my dials. I'd make 1 or 2 phone calls. I'd be like, okay, I got that done. I go do something else. I'll get my 30 done, but over a course of 8 hours. And over the years, if I can do a consistent cadence, I get really good. And then somebody picks up the phone and you're already on a roll. And it happens to be that person that, you know, so be consistent, block your time and make those calls, emails, texts, whatever you do in a sequence. Try not to stop. It's something that's been really working for me lately.
I think getting on, a call or two or getting on a roll kind of lubricates the engine.
Right.
Right. That first phone call of the day, even 25 years in, could be less impactful than my 5th one of the day, right? Or my 10th one of the day. So yeah, you got to get the juices flowing, get the brain going, get the tongue loosening up, get the creativity going. Any closing thoughts, boys? Sonny? Anything?
No.
For the recruiter at home about to pick up a phone?
Have to talk to people.
Have to talk to people.
I have a closing statement. Happy New Year to you two guys.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Salute.
Listener at home, hope you have a great 2023. Or if you're listening to this in future years, if we're still around, have a great 2024, 2025, 2026.
And we will have a live session somewhere where you can call in or come in and visit us for a live discussion in 2023. It's going to be so much fun.
I can't.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.